The one position in the game of volleyball that I believe to be the hardest in the entire sport has to be the volleyball position of setter. As a setter, you have one of the most important jobs in the entire game of volleyball, and that is running your offense. In most cases, the hitters of a volleyball team are only as good as their setter and can be elevated so much further past their normal capabilities when they have a really good setter dishing them the ball. If you didn't already know, I have played the position of setter throughout my entire volleyball career. In fact, all the way back when I was in 7th grade, it was the first position I ever played. Here I am today, over 7 years later, and after tens of thousands of volleyball points played, I am here to teach you how to become a volleyball setter. So without further ado, PME Volleyball presents How to Be a Setter. Volleyball Positions Explained. Make sure to leave a like on this video, comment down below the volleyball position that you play, and make sure to subscribe if you're new. We are on the road to 250,000 subscribers, and we make all sorts of videos, pretty much everything volleyball. Before we hop into today's video, I would like to take an opportunity to thank the sponsor of today's video, VKTRY Insoles. If you haven't heard of VKTRY Insoles, they are the world's best carbon fiber insoles that you can put in your volleyball shoes to help you jump higher and protect yourself from injuries. I have been playing volleyball in VKTRY Insoles for over 18 months now, and I can say with 100% certainty that VKTRY Insoles are one of my favorite volleyball products on planet Earth. Not only do they put a little extra bounce in my volleyball game by helping me jump higher, they have also helped to keep me healthy while I play volleyball. I haven't had a significant injury ever since I started wearing VKTRY Insoles. So if you are looking for a volleyball product to help elevate your game, I recommend you go check out VKTRY Insoles. You can use the description and the link of this video to get you 20% off a pair of VKTRY Insoles of your very own. I highly recommend if you're looking to elevate your volleyball game, you go ahead and check them out. And once again, I just want to say thank you to VKTRY Insoles for being the sponsor of today's video. Now with that out of the way, let's hop straight back into the video. Now I understand that all of you viewers watching this video might be in a different step in your volleyball journey. And for some of you, you might be completely new to the game of volleyball. And for those of you watching this video, I highly recommend you watch the entire thing. And for those of you that are more experienced in the game of volleyball, this video is going to be broken up into parts so you, the viewer, can skip around and find what might be helpful for your volleyball journey. Part 1 of this video is going to be explaining what a setter does. Part 2 of this video is going to be breaking down the fundamentals of actually setting a volleyball. Part 3 is my 5 best tips and tricks to make you a better volleyball setter. And part 4 is 2 volleyball players at the professional level that I think you should be watching and implement what they do into your game. So let's hop into part 1. What does a setter actually do? If I only had one sentence to describe what a setter does, I would say this. The responsibility of a setter is to control the flow of the offense. The setter position almost always takes control of the second of the 3 touches that a volleyball team is allowed. What they are trying to do with that second touch is set up their teammates and put them in a position to score the volleyball and thus award their team a point. I think setter is a very low floor, high ceiling type of volleyball position. And what I mean by that is I think just about anybody can set a volleyball at an elementary level. When you start off setting a volleyball, you might find your sets to be super inconsistent. Some of them will be really high, some of them will be pretty low, others will be tight to the net, and others will be too far off. You'll find that as you get closer to the setter position skill ceiling, you'll be able to make more consistent sets as you'll have more control over where you want the volleyball to go. As a setter, it is highly important that you engage all of your options on offense. You don't want to get tunnel vision and just set the same person over and over and over again. The worst thing that can possibly happen on a volleyball court is a hitter having the mentality that they are just simply not going to get set. If you find yourself as a setter going through an entire set and not setting one of your options, that's going to create a serious mental block for that player, and that is exactly what we don't want to happen. I think that the position of setter is perfectly set up to be a leader of the volleyball team, which means if you are looking to be the setter of your volleyball team, it is super important that you are not only a good setter, but a good leader as well. Because since you have so much more control over the volleyball compared to any other position in the game, a lot of responsibility is going to be in your hands. And being a good leader can help you navigate all of this responsibility that you have been given, especially compared to a setter with lousy leadership skills. You'll see a lot of volleyball teams elect for their setter to be their team captain. And trust me, this isn't done by coincidence. Some of the secondary skills that a setter also needs to develop include blocking, serving, back row defense, and generating your own offense. Blocking and defense go hand in hand as the defensive responsibilities of a setter. When a setter is in the front row, they're gonna need to be able to block the other team's outside hitter. When they're in the back row, they need to prepare just in case the volleyball gets hit at them. And in that case, their job of controlling the second contact goes out the window, and they need to now worry about getting a good touch on the first contact. Serving is a pretty consistent responsibility for all positions in the game of volleyball, and just like the rest, it's super important for setters to have a good serve. As a setter, learn how to serve. And lastly, as a setter, if you are able to generate your own offense, and what I mean by that is tipping the volleyball, maybe even hitting the volleyball on two, it's just something that'll keep the other team's blockers guessing. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into that later into the video. Now that we know what the responsibilities of a setter are and some of their secondary skills, let's take a deeper look into the main job of a setter, which is setting the volleyball. Part 2, the fundamental skill of being a setter. I think that setting the volleyball is the most technical skill in the game of volleyball. This is because there's a lot of variation that goes into the technique of actually setting a volleyball. There are two main techniques that setters will use when they set the volleyball. They will either do a standing set or a jump set. Standing setting is the basic form of setting a volleyball. This is when your feet are firmly planted on the ground when you make contact with a volleyball. And whether you're a standing setter or a jump setter, the most important piece of advice to improve the accuracy of your setting is getting your feet set first. What you need to do as a setter is locate where the pass is going and beat the volleyball to that spot. Once you beat the volleyball to the spot that it would normally land if you weren't to set it, you're able to set up a strong foundation in which you're planted and you can push that volleyball to where you want it to go. The only change from a normal standing set to a jump set is once you get to the spot where the volleyball is going to land and create that foundation, instead of staying planted on the floor, you're going to jump into the volleyball. And this is helpful for a couple of different reasons. For one, you might be able to generate more power and set the ball farther since you're jumping into it. Because you're able to generate more power off the set, it also allows you to speed up your hands. Quicker hands means a quicker volleyball offense. And in a game of speed, this can be crucial to get the best of your opponent. A very common mistake, one that I made a ton throughout my career once I transitioned over to jump setting, is not getting my feet set before I set the volleyball. I used to have the tendency of jumping into the set rather than getting set to set before I jump set. I just said the word set like 4 times there. So what I recommend you do if you want to make the leap to jump setting is pay attention to your feet every time you set the volleyball. Ask yourself, did I get set to set that volleyball or did I kind of drift into it? Make sure you get consistent at setting your feet first before you let that volleyball fly. You'll see a lot of improvements in accuracy this way. Just like there are two main techniques that you can use to set the volleyball, there are two directions that you can also set the volleyball in. And that is a forward set or a backward set. The forward set or the front set is the more commonly used direction to set a volleyball in. You'll use a front set to either set your outside hitter in the front row or the back row and the middle. Whereas a back set usually only goes to your opposite hitter, whether they're in the front row or the back row. Sometimes you'll see a middle run, what we like to call a back one, and this is when they're going behind the setter instead of in front of them. But more commonly, you'll see a lot of middle runs be done in front of the setter. I would say front setting is definitely easier than back setting just because you're able to see where you want to put the volleyball at. When you're back setting a volleyball, you're setting the volleyball behind you, so you kind of have to envision where you want that volleyball to land. I would encourage all setters to become proficient in both front and back setting because an overall common theme of being a good setter is as followed. The best setters can do everything when it comes to setting. So practice doing everything. The last thing I would like to mention in this part of the video is setter signs. And the signs you use as a volleyball team can vary. There were signs I used for my high school volleyball team that differed from my club volleyball team, and then when I got to the college game, we had a completely different language that we called the sets that we ran on offense. So what's important as a setter is that you give each of your hitters signs, especially when you're in serve receive. What you'll see a lot of setters do is they'll face each of their hitter and pull back their jersey just like this, so they can hide the sign from the other team and tell each of their positions what to run on offense. We won't go too in depth on what good runs are for outside hitters and opposite hitters, but setter signs are especially important when communicating what you want your middle to do in serve receive. This is because if you get a good pass in serve receive, the amount of different runs that you can generate with your middle are almost limitless. You can run front sets, back sets, shoot sets, gap sets, you name it, get creative with it. There are a ton of different things that you can do with your middle, but this only works if you and your middle are on the same page. So make sure you show them a little sign and you are both on the same page of what that sign means. That way, you can get to running on offense. Part 3, PME Volleyball's top 5 tips and tricks to become a better setter. Number 1, learn how to reverse the flow. Depending on what level you currently play volleyball at, you might have heard your coach tell you to reverse the flow more. And just in case you have no idea what that means, let me explain. Let's say in serve receive, the pass is a pretty good distance from the net, but it was a little too far over left, closer to where the outside hitter is. Instead of making what might be perceived to be the easier set, where you just set your outside hitter because you're closer to them, you don't have to push the volleyball as far, you might have the opportunity to put up a really good set. Well, guess what? The blockers on the other team are probably sensing and reading the same exact things that you are thinking seeing with that pass. So instead of making the easy set and going to your outside hitter, reversing the flow refers to flinging that volleyball all the way back to your opposite on the far side of the volleyball court. Even if that set isn't necessarily perfect, which you should always aim for it to be, if it is a good enough set, it can create a one-on-one for your opposite hitter to only go up against one blocker, compared to if you were to set your outside hitter, they would most likely have to go up with two because they were reading the flow of the offense. When you reverse it, you throw off the blockers on the other side of the net and create opportunities for your team to be more successful. Reversing the flow can go both ways. If you're closer to the opposite hitter, you can reverse the flow by pushing that volleyball way out in front of you to the outside hitter. When I encourage setters to reverse the flow, I don't want young setters out there to just try and play hero ball and make the most difficult set possible in every situation, because that's not helpful to anybody. But if you are able to reverse the flow maybe 30, even 35% of the time when you set and serve receive, this is just a great way to keep the other team's blockers guessing. So I highly recommend you practice these more difficult sets. Tip number 2, understand your matchups. Just as much as volleyball is a physical game, it is a mental game, and especially when it comes to the position of setter, this applies. If you are simply taking the time to process what is happening on the other side of the net before you set the volleyball, what you'll see a lot of high-level setters do is they'll even take a look at the other blockers on the other side of the net before they set the volleyball while that volleyball is in play. I know it is absolutely crazy and something that I've tried to work on, but I quite haven't gotten good enough to figure out how to do that consistently yet. And depending on where you are in your current volleyball journey, it might not be helpful for you to add this extra step before you set the volleyball. Always analyze what you see on the other side of the net. If you see one of the outside hitters on the other team, they're a little undersized, a little bit shorter than the rest of the volleyball players, especially the ones up at the net blocking, find the hitter that is matched up against them on your team and attack that weak blocker. Maybe the other team has a super tall player, but they're not super good at pushing their hands over the net and creating an effective block. By setting up your hitter in a position to use that volleyball and either throw it off the block, maybe tip it into the block, or just hit it into the block, because since it's straight up in the air, it might hit the block and go out of bounds. As a setter, it is so important to process what you're seeing on the other side of the net, especially taking a look at the other team's blockers. Use that information to create favorable matchups for your team and rack up those assists. Tip number 3, create your own offense. Creating your own offense as a setter means you are tipping or hitting the second ball instead of setting it. This can really only be done in the front row, and it gets super technical and tricky with the rules in order to do this from the back row. So for this video, let's focus on the ways you can be an offensive setter from the front row. Tipping the volleyball is a great way to keep the other team's blockers on their toes. Simply taking your left hand and pushing the volleyball over the net into what we like to call the campfire or the donut of the volleyball court, which is just the middle where there's no players really playing defense. You can be successful in finding 1 or 2 points every set by doing this. It'll constantly keep the other team's blockers guessing, and if you are a jump setter doing this, you might even be able to pull them when you jump set, meaning they jump with you instead of one of the hitters. And again, this will just lead to more favorable matchups for your team when you run on offense, because most of the times a blocker that is late is just as good as not having a blocker block you at all. Blocky, block, block. So yeah, I would recommend you set or dump or tip the volleyball maybe once, twice a set. Definitely don't overdo it, and try your best not to mess it up, aka put it in the middle of the net on your side, because then it just doesn't become as effective. If you have the athleticism to do it, I even recommend you hit that volleyball on 2. That is an even better way to keep the other team's block on their toes. Tip number 4, find the hot hand. If you have one of your outside hitters, or maybe your opposite, heck, even your middle, and you have given them 2 or 3 sets and they have scored on each and every one of those sets, continue to feed that hot hand on offense. Volleyball is almost completely a momentum-based game, and if you find that one of your offensive pieces is cooking, let them cook. This is not to be confused with getting tunnel vision. Getting tunnel vision as a setter means you are setting the same teammate over and over and over again, and it's not really effective. When you get this tunnel vision, it's simply better to just spread out the offense and try and find a different way to score that volleyball. But when you have a teammate that has scored multiple points in a row, there is no shame in going back into that player until they cool down. So find that hot hand and feed it. And lastly, tip number 5, as a setter, you constantly need to be lifting up your teammates. One of the things that I have made my personal mission as a setter to do is I always try my best to take the blame for something messing up in a connection between me and my hitter. There might be times where it was the hitter's fault and it was actually a good set and they just messed it up. Maybe they jumped a little too early, or they just had a bad contact with the volleyball. It happened. And likewise, sometimes the set that I give my teammates wasn't to their particular taste, and in that case, it's my fault. The best thing that you could possibly do for the the morale of your volleyball team is simply accept the blame of what just happened and then move on. Focus on the next point and leave what just happened in the past. I have played with some absolutely phenomenal volleyball teammates that have just had such a difficult time beating the mental aspects of the game. And the best way that I was able to help them get out of their own head was just trying my best to take some of the mental anguish that they might have been facing in that moment away from them. A simple, hey man, my bad, I'll get you a better set can go a long way. I guarantee you, if you're able to lower your pride and serve your teammates in this way, regardless of whose fault it was, you will help boost the morale of your teammates. Part 4. These are 2 professional volleyball players that I think every setter should be watching and studying. The first one is Micah Christensen, the national team setter for the country of USA. Micah Christensen is an absolutely phenomenal setter and one that I had the great opportunity to actually watch set in person. He has absolutely phenomenal hands and has perfected the method of setting each of his teammates in the way that they prefer, the way that'll make them the most successful on the volleyball court. One of the other great things about Micah Christensen is he is a great example of what offensive setting should look like. As a left-handed volleyball player, he does a great job of throwing off the other team's blockers by going up on 2 and hitting the volleyball every so often. He does a great job of keeping the other team's blockers guessing by mixing in some offense of his own. The other setter that I think would be great to take a look at is Bruno Rezende, the national team setter for Brazil. Although he might not be the national team setter for too much longer, since he is 38 years old, he might be one of the most accurate setters to have ever set a volleyball. Almost every single set that Bruno produces is darn near perfect. He has perfected the accuracy craft of the game of volleyball, and I highly recommend you watch him set the volleyball and the fundamentals that he uses to be so accurate. And that concludes today's video of how to become a setter in the Volleyball Positions Explained series. I hope that my explanation of the setter position and the tips and tricks that I provided in this video helped you either learn more about the position or maybe even helped you become a better setter. If you want to see me do a video like this for every single volleyball position, I would be more than happy to. Comment down below which volleyball position we should break down next, and if it's middle, libero, or outside hitter, I have a little bit of research to do because I personally have never played any of those positions. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to leave a like on it. It helps out the channel a ton, and make sure to subscribe if you're new. We make videos on pretty much everything volleyball, and I'll catch you guys in the next PME volleyball video. Peace.